Imagine a candidate for President of the United States with suspicious and undisclosed ties to a foreign country. Imagine that foreign country was running a campaign to influence the results of the American election. It sounds like the rejected plot of a bad 1980s Cold War movie, but it might actually be true. We know that Russia is trying to meddle in our election. The Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence are confident that the Russian government directed recent hacks with the intention of interfering with our election process. Donald Trump was reportedly briefed on Russia's efforts in mid-August, but has continued to deflect blame from Russia by trying to blame China or even a 400-pound hacker.
Maybe there is no hacking. It could also be China. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay?
Russia has been propping up far-right parties in countries across Europe. Golden Dawn in Greece, AfD in Germany, Marine Le Pen's National Front in France. They're xenophobic, nationalist, anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, and they want to weaken the European Union. Russia has also been connected to the use of politically motivated hacks and strategic leaks as weapons of cyber warfare. So why would Russia and Putin have an interest in seeing Donald Trump win the election in November? It's because it's frightening how closely the foreign policy of Trump aligns with Putin's preferences, and concerning enough that the former acting director of the CIA said that Putin had recruited Trump as, quote,
an unwitting agent of the Russian Federation.
Russia's #1 foreign policy goal is to weaken the European Union and NATO. Trump's called NATO obsolete.
I think NATO may be obsolete.
And suggested he wouldn't defend our NATO allies unless they pay up.
They gotta pay.
Trump's even called for removing American troops stationed at our bases overseas, undermining our ability to stand up to Putin. Trump denied Russia was in Ukraine.
He's not gonna go into Ukraine.
Asserted that the people of Crimea prefer to be under Russian control.
The people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia.
None of those are true, but they are the very same talking points that Vladimir Putin has used. Trump has expressed a willingness to lift the sanctions imposed on Russia for invading and occupying Crimea and eastern Ukraine, and said he, quote, would be looking at recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea. And during the Republican National Convention, Trump's campaign staffers worked behind the scenes to make sure the party's platform weakened its stance on Russian intervention. Trump has surrounded himself with foreign policy advisors connected to Putin and Russia. Yes, the campaign chairman who appears to have received secret millions from the pro-Kremlin dictator resigned, but that's far from the end of the story. U.S. intelligence is reportedly investigating a Trump foreign policy advisor's alleged meetings with senior Russian officials. A former campaign advisor's PR firm was hired to help improve Putin's image in the United States. And then there's Michael Flynn. When Trump received his first classified intelligence briefing, it was Flynn who he brought in the room with him. Flynn has defended Russian intervention in Syria, where their airstrikes have killed more than 1,000 civilians. Flynn has praised Russia's influence in Europe and regularly appears on the Kremlin-backed propaganda outlet Russia Today. And how many former top spies in the US military would surprise everyone by showing up at a black-tie gala in Moscow where Putin was the marquee speaker? The other half of the equation is that we have no idea how deep Donald Trump's financial interests and ties to Russia really go. Trump has a long history of engaging in Russia-related business deals. Over the years, he's tried numerous times to build a Trump Tower in Russia and has made deals with powerful Russian interests, from paying the USSR to sponsor Soviet bikers to race in the Tour de Trump, to a deal with Putin's favorite mixed martial arts fighter. He even tried to sell Trump vodka to the Russians. In 2006, Trump's partners on a project in Panama traveled to Moscow to sell condos to Russian investors. In 2008, Trump sold a mansion in Palm Beach to a Russian oligarch for $95 million. That's $54 million more than what Trump had paid for it just 4 years earlier. Maybe that's why, as Donald Jr. said, Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets. We see a lot of money pouring in from Russia. In 2013, Trump brought his Miss Universe pageant to Moscow. Trump bragged that almost all of the oligarchs were there. One in particular, Russian billionaire Aras Agalarov, paid Trump millions to bring the pageant to Russia. Before the trip was over, Trump and Agalarov reportedly signed a deal to explore future real estate opportunities in Russia. And there are other Trump business relationships that should raise questions. Trump partnered with a company called the Bayrock Group on Trump Soho. The Bayrock Group was founded by a former Soviet-era commerce official. Another Bayrock executive named Felix Sater was the person Trump asked to escort his children around Moscow on a trip in 2006. Trump then named Sater a senior advisor in 2010.
Felix Sater, a twice-convicted felon, once tied to organized crime and a massive stock scam.
Another business partner on that Trump Soho project was the Sapir Organization, whose founder, Tamir Sapir, was from the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, and whose family Trump has called great friends. The Sapir organization has long been rumored to be connected to organized crime, so I want to put a fine point on this. We have here a presidential candidate with deep ties to Russia, who won't disclose anything about them, who consistently echoes Russian talking points, who appears on Russia's propaganda network, who hires staff with Russian ties, who has defended Putin's actions, who has exhibited little regard for democracy or human rights. Music to Putin's ears. No one should feel comfortable if we get to November without far better answers about how much Trump has invested in Russia, and more importantly, how much Russia has invested in Trump. Because what we have right now is a Trump policy agenda that aligns far more closely with the interests of Vladimir Putin and Russia than the interests of the United States. Far from Trump's claim of America first, that's Russia first. And it's not someone who should be our next commander-in-chief.